To truly understand the roots of Japanese civilization, we must travel back in time thousands of years to the era of the Jomon people who inhabited the islands of Japan long before the rise of samurai, shoguns, and emperors. The Jomon period represents the earliest known civilization in Japan, spanning nearly 10,000 years, beginning around 14,000 BCE and continuing until approximately 300 BCE. This period marks the dawn of settled life, as humans began creating the first communities in Japan. The Jomon people are best known for their pottery, which is among the oldest in the world. This remarkable civilization left behind not only a legacy of art, but also signs of a complex and evolving way of life. In this documentary, we'll explore how the Jomon period unfolded, how life changed throughout the millennia, and how these early settlers adapted to their environment, gradually shaping the foundation of Japanese culture. The story of the Jomon begins with the migration of early human populations into the Japanese archipelago. Around 35,000 years ago, during the final phases of the Ice Age, early humans crossed land bridges from the Asian mainland into the Japanese islands. As the climate gradually warmed and the glaciers retreated, these early settlers developed a distinctive culture that would later become known as the Jomon. The Jomon people were hunter-gatherers, relying on the rich abundance of natural resources provided by the islands. They lived in small, nomadic groups, foraging for wild plants, hunting animals, and fishing in rivers and along the coasts. The availability of food and the warming climate allowed the population to grow, and over time, the Jomon people began to establish more permanent settlements. These early settlements were modest, with people living in pit dwellings, semi-subterranean homes dug into the ground and covered with wooden or thatched roofs. These homes provided insulation from both the heat of summer and the cold of winter, demonstrating the Jomon people's adaptability and growing understanding of their environment. One of the defining features of the Jomon period is the pottery that the people crafted. This cord-marked pottery, from which the period gets its name, is the oldest in Japan and some of the earliest pottery ever discovered in the world. The Jomon people made these vessels by hand, pressing ropes or cords into the wet clay to create decorative patterns before firing the pottery. Early Jomon pottery was relatively simple in design and function, used primarily for cooking and storage. However, as the centuries passed, pottery became more elaborate, with intricate patterns and even figurative elements. This evolution reflects the increasing sophistication of Jomon society and the role pottery played in both daily life and ritual practices. Alongside pottery, the Jomon people also created small clay figurines, known as Dogu. These figurines, often depicting humanoid shapes with exaggerated features, are believed to have been used in rituals related to fertility, healing, or spiritual protection. The Dogu figurines are some of the earliest evidence of the spiritual life of the Jomon people, showing that they believed in powers or forces beyond the physical world. As the climate continued to warm, the environment of Japan underwent significant changes. Large forests emerged filled with oak, chestnut and walnut trees, while rivers and coastlines teemed with fish. The Jomon people adapted to these changes by developing seasonal foraging cycles, taking advantage of the rich resources around them. During the spring and summer, they gathered nuts, seeds and berries, while in the fall and winter they hunted deer, boar and smaller animals and fished along the coasts. To support their hunting and gathering lifestyle, the Jomon people developed a wide range of tools and technologies. They used stone tools like knives and axes for hunting and processing food, while their advanced fishing techniques included nets, harpoons and hooks. They also began to make use of woodworking tools, enabling them to craft more complex structures and boats. The ability to exploit the natural resources around them allowed the Jomon to develop semi-permanent settlements along rivers and coastal areas. These settlements could house larger groups of people for extended periods, allowing them to store food and weather seasonal changes more effectively. As they became more settled, their communities grew and their social structures became more complex. As time progressed, Jomon society became increasingly sedentary, with larger and more permanent villages emerging across Japan. These villages often contained several pit dwellings, indicating that multiple families lived together in a communal structure. While the Jomon period is generally thought of as egalitarian, evidence from burial sites suggests that there may have been a degree of social stratification, with certain individuals being buried with more elaborate grave goods, such as jewelry, pottery, and tools. The presence of grave goods and ceremonial objects hints at the growing importance of spirituality in Jomon life. While their society remained largely focused on survival through hunting and gathering, the ritual practices and spiritual beliefs of the Jomon people began to evolve. Stone circles and ritualistic areas found at certain sites suggest that these communities gathered for ceremonial events, possibly to mark changes in the seasons or to honor ancestors. The Dogu figurines played an important role in Jomon spirituality. These small, intricately designed figures may have been used in fertility rituals or as protective totems. Their exaggerated physical features, often with large eyes and wide hips, suggest that they were symbols of fertility, health, and prosperity. The presence of these figures in burial sites also suggests a belief in the afterlife, further indicating the spiritual depth of the Jomon people. While the Jomon period is often characterized as a hunter-gatherer society, there is evidence that toward the later stages of the period, the Jomon people began experimenting with early forms of agriculture. They likely cultivated millet, barley, and possibly rice, though this practice remained small-scale compared to the wet rice farming that would dominate later periods. This gradual shift toward agriculture marked an important change in Jomon society. While hunting, gathering and fishing remained central to their way of life, the ability to grow and store food would have provided greater stability and allowed for further population growth. The combination of these factors contributed to the gradual transition from a purely foraging society to one that began to incorporate elements of agriculture. As the Jomon period progressed, their tools and technologies continued to advance. Stone tools became more specialized and woodworking techniques improved, allowing for the construction of more durable buildings and boats. This period of innovation allowed the Jomon people to thrive in diverse environments, from the snowy northern regions of Japan to the subtropical southern islands. By around 300 BCE, the Jomon period began to come to an end as a new cultural influence swept across Japan, the Yayoi people. The Yayoi introduced advanced agricultural practices, particularly wet rice farming and metalworking with bronze and iron, which would transform Japanese society. While the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of the Jomon faded, the legacy of the Jomon period persisted, particularly in the realms of pottery, ritual practices, and environmental adaptation. Today, the Jomon people are often celebrated as the earliest ancestors of Japan. Their culture, art, and innovation set the foundation for many aspects of Japanese civilization. The intricate pottery and Dogu figurines they left behind offer a glimpse into their rich, spiritual, and artistic lives. Modern-day archaeological discoveries continue to shed light on the Jomon period, deepening our understanding of how these early communities survived and thrived for millennia. Though the Jomon people may seem distant from the Japan we know today, their legacy continues to influence the nation's culture. From their mastery of pottery and their harmonious relationship with the environment to their early forms of social and spiritual organization, the Jomon laid the foundation for one of the world's oldest continuous cultures.